Rob, Dan Marino, who is one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. In fact, our friend of our show, Rod Woodson, one of the greatest defensive backs ever. Rob, he says that Marino is the best quarterback he's ever seen. Marino doesn't, obviously he's not in the GOAT conversation, but he gets love. He's, an all-time great. He's a Hall of Famer. He was on the NFL's top, 100th anniversary team, one of the 10 quarterbacks to make that. So he gets love, but probably not as much as some people might think he should. And Rob, he didn't win a ring. And so he doesn't get as much credit and attention as you might think he would. But Rob, he is known for being one of the most prolific passers in the history of the NFL. And for a little context on that, his second year in the league, Rob, he threw for 5,084 yards. Rob, first player ever to do that, I believe. 48 touchdowns as well. Rob, the second most touchdowns that year by a quarterback was 32. And no one else threw more than 30 or threw even 30. Both of those records stood for 20 years. No one, there were only two other quarterbacks in the league who threw for more than 4,000 yards that year. So that's how far out in front of everybody he was. Never had another year like that, but, had several great years. 9-time Pro Bowler. So just a prolific passer. But he was speaking on a podcast. Whose podcast was it, Rob G, recently? Kevin Clark's podcast. And here's what he said.
I'm retired. I don't have to prove it. So yes, we'd throw for 6,000 yards. And, I will say that defenses in the middle of my career and then towards the end, and they got a little more complex, and guys do a lot more things now as far as blitzing and changing personnel and all that than I did earlier in my career. Later in my career, I had to deal with it. But so it would be a lot of fun.
So good look, give him credit, Rob. He didn't have to throw that out. That, hey, defenses did get more sophisticated as my career went on. And now they're obviously way more sophisticated than the ones he faced in the 80s. But he said he would throw for 6,000 yards today. And they do play 17 games. Would he do it? Who knows? Like he said, he never has to go and prove it. But what I will say, Rob, is he was so far out in front of everyone else that throwing for 5,000 at that time was kind of like the equivalent. Like you'd look at it and say, yeah, he could throw for 6,000. Because remember, Rob, he did it. Now, he talked about the defenses weren't that sophisticated. This was his second year. He did it when quarterbacks really could get hit. Drilled. Right? They weren't protected like they are today. And receivers weren't either. So it was harder to throw the football successfully back in that time. And so, I wouldn't put it past him. As far out in front of everybody as he was back then, why not? Why couldn't he do that now?
I think that's just, I think it's pretty obvious. They throw the ball more than they ever did before. There's just a lot of different things. They allow quarterbacks. You can't really hurt quarterbacks. They protect the quarterbacks. They protect the receivers. Yep. It's just a different game. And of course, the way that they do all these guys who are middle-of-the-road quarterbacks have ridiculous numbers and all this because they throw the football every down. So, sure. I just wonder about, even the question about could he do it or whatever. Joe Namath rushed through Chris for 4,000 yards.
Right.
Go back and look at 12 games. Go back and look.
That was in the AFL, right?
Yeah, but I'm just saying he threw for 12,000.
Yeah. No, I'm not belittling it, but I'm just saying, yeah.
No, but I'm saying, and that, I
that's
believe
what
it was 12 games.
Obviously he was great in college, but
he was great at Alabama, right?
that became his claim to fame in the AFL. Like, threw for 4,000 yards, first player ever to do that in 1967.
Right,
Rob.
think about that. 1967.
And it was in 14. That was 14
games. Okay,
14 games.
I thought it was 12. But
for context, he averaged 286 yards a game that year. Here, I'm going to throw something else at you that's going to make you chuckle. Dan Marino, when he threw for 5,000, Rob, in 16 games, that was 317 yards a game. But here's the interesting thing, and I don't say this to take anything away from Namath, but it just shows how different the sport was back then. That year, Rob, when he threw for 4,000 yards, Namath, he threw 26 touchdowns
and 28
interceptions.
Yeah, I was going to say
28.
Well, but if you're throwing the ball
his
up that
first,
much,
in the year before that, it was 19 touchdowns, 27 interceptions.
Yep.
He actually had way more interceptions. You probably knew this in his career than touchdowns. 173 touchdowns, 220 interceptions.
Yep. I'm not shocked. That's why when you said it, I knew it was a lot because he did throw picks, but they were throwing the ball around, and but still, that is a big number, 4,000. You know what I mean, Chris? Back in the 60s, they were still smash mouth and running the football, and receivers were as big as the quarterbacks back then.
Well, and you talk about Marino, his receivers they were small. Mark Clayton and Mark Duper. He had small receivers. They were really good, but it was just he was like a video game, Rob, really. I mean, it was incredible what he was doing. And that's why a guy like Rod Woodson says, he was the best I ever saw throw it. Now, obviously, you couldn't call him to go. I don't say that, but he was phenomenal. And he does deserve all the accolades he gets. And we get it. He didn't win a ring. Got to the Super Bowl, Rob, his second year. Never got back. He probably thought he was going to be there several times. You know what I mean? And that's why
after sophomore, after second year, are you kidding? Of course he thought he was going back.
Guys have to capitalize when you it'd be like Joe Burrow, and this could happen.
And you got to remember, he had
Don
like
Shula
Joe Burrow
never getting to another Super Bowl. Never getting to another Super Bowl.
It could happen.
Remember, Aaron Rodgers never got to another Super Bowl after winning it early in his career.
It's not automatic.
It can happen.
Definitely.
No.
It's
Dan Marino. I don't mind him saying it, Rob. He didn't say it. He didn't say it braggadociously.
I was going to say at first I thought when I read it, I got to be honest, I thought it was pathetic that he would even have to entertain that. I did. I thought is he really being trying to say, oh, of course I don't say 8,000
So you thought
yards.
he was coming out
and
almost
the way,
unsolicited.
Trying to prove something to people. And I was like, why would he have to do that with the career that he had? There's no reason to do that. And then the way I heard the sound was definitely kind of soft. You know what I mean? It wasn't.
Right.
He
was asked. It sounded like Rob G was asked, I imagine.
Yeah. Yes, he was asked. And Rob, don't short sell yourself. When me and him talked before the show about this topic, Rob was going hard at Dan Marino.
But you got to admit, I didn't hear the sound.
I know, but to see him pull it back like this is really impressive.
Yeah, I thought he was sticking his chest out about, if I was playing today, old guy trying to flex his muscles. And I'm like, dude, you had a great career. You don't need to do that. You know, I hate to hear players like that. Oh, if I was playing today, if I could bat if I could bat 220, I would have hit 700 home runs. You know what I mean?
He's like, Chris, get out of my way. Give me 6 minutes. Let me cook. Hang on.
Right. And for him, I mean, Rob, great quarterback, but that wouldn't have been wise. In addition to being rude, it wouldn't have been wise just because, you know what the pushback would have been. He never won.
Yep.
You know? That would have been the pushback. And whether fair or not, that's what people would have said. So stop, get off your high horse. But
that's what I'm saying, right? That's
why he didn't do that. And
it was a soft soak into that. You know what I mean? It wasn't like he was sticking his chest out and saying how great he was, and if I played today, whatever, and I'd be making $80 million a year. It wasn't that kind of a braggadocious.
And he was honest. Look, the defenses I faced earlier in my career weren't as sophisticated as today. And even later in his career for that matter, but he just talked about how those defenses did, you even started to see some of the sophistication later in his career that you didn't see early on. Philadelphia just scored, Rob. They're up 10-7. It was mostly running game, though. They got to get that passing game together.